What's up, everybody? My name is Jacob Hardison, and today I'm going to give my initial impressions on the RC8B4.1e. Welcome back, everybody, to, of course, the lovely Adrenaline RC YouTube channel, where today I'm going to be giving my initial impressions of the RC8B4.1e. Now, I'm sure that after that last video, there were plenty of you guys that were surprised to see this in my Motorama recap, but I did decide about a week before the event to get this guy built up. There was no, qualms necessarily that I had with the Tekno, other than I just wanted to have a little bit more time with it, testing, before I sent out to a big event with it. So I decided to go to the B41 for Motorama. That way I could follow Lee's guidance throughout the weekend and not have to necessarily worry about the setup end of things, mostly just worry about my mental game and my driving end of things. And I feel like that overall, as you guys could tell from that Motorama video, I feel like I was able to achieve that goal. So now we've gotten a little bit off topic there, we'll get back into today's video, which is going to be, of course, my impressions of this car. So we're going to start out with just kind of an overview of what my electronics are and what couple of changes that I have, what extra parts I have, I guess you could say. Then go into kind of the more build, tuning, driving end of things, and then end off with, of course, just kind of my overview of how I feel about the car at the moment. This is going to be definitely probably a little bit less in depth of a video compared to that Tekno, just because I quite literally have only had it for 2 weeks at this point. I had it the week before Motorama, and then when we got back, I've been working on the indoor track here at Adrenaline, so we got it all nice and rebuilt. But other than that 2-week period of actually driving the car, that's really it. I haven't touched it at all since. So very, very on the raw initial end of things here. So to jump into starting today's video, we'll go ahead and just go over what I've got here. As per usual, on the outside of the car, we've got our trusty JC wheels and tires. And then we've got another JC product, the S15 body. Now this is going to be the EB48 body, not the actual B4 body. It's just the body that I happen to have, and I didn't really have enough time to get a new one painted up. I will have a new one soon enough, but to get through the weekend, the Tekno is still a little bit more narrow compared to this car, but it was close enough that I was able to drop it on. And we just kind of stretched it out a little bit, but it worked. It stayed on the car, and I got through the weekend, so I'm happy. Then on the rear of the car, we have our trusty Razor wing. Can never go wrong there. It's a very stable wing. It's easy to drive. It's predictable. I enjoy using it. And on top of that, actually mounting it to the car is going to be a Mallory Performance wing button. It's going to be a universal wing button, and it just looks good. So now that we've gone over the outside portion of the car, we'll go ahead and pull the body off and show you the inside. And if you do need a new body while we're pulling this off, need something fresh painted up, definitely make sure you hit up Ronnie Setzer at Setzer's RC Art or SS Hobbies, whatever your easiest form of contact for them is, and they'll get you all squared away. As you guys have seen in some thumbnails, and then of course my Tekno video, he does great work, so you can never go wrong there. On the inside of the vehicle, we'll start out at the front with just the steering servo. This is going to be a USRC 1776 servo. This is going to be the same servo that I ran in the Tekno. What you'll notice if you video reference both of them is that the logos on them are going to be a little bit different. That is just because in the Tekno, that was the prototype USRC servo, whereas this is actually the true full production version of it. But they are the same servo. It's a great servo, can never go wrong. It is an in-house brand we have here at Adrenaline, so always a great option and at a great price point. The brain of the operation is going to be a Tekin RX8 Gen 3, so a little bit different than before. The Tekin stuff is just really smooth, and it's what I happen to have here at the shop, so I wanted to give it a try it again. I think it is a very pretty ESC. I do like the white casing on it, and it definitely has driven very well for me. I haven't had any issues out of it. It's been smooth, it's been reliable, so I can't have any complaints there at all. the motor that we're using here, the actual thing that's going to move the wheels, is going to be a Tekin T8. So the same line of motors as what I use in everything. This one though in particular is just going to be a 1900 kV rather than the 2050. No particular reason for the change in kV. They're both good engines, or motors I guess is the better describer word. 2050 you probably get a little bit more top end out of it, but they both do the job very well. Both have plenty of power. Nothing crazy there at all. And then to cool it down, I do have a ProTech just 30x30 metal fan. Again, nothing crazy there. Battery wise, with the B4, of course, we do have the saddle set up, and we're gonna have two SMC 6400 high voltage packs that have done me very well. I have 3 sets of them, no complaints there. They provide good power. They don't have a crazy drop off, but we can talk more about performance of the batteries in a future video. Now we've gone over the actual electronic end of things, we can go ahead and talk about just the kind of blingy bits that I have on here slash durability bits. Starting again at the front, I am going to have the chrome shock shafts. I did have one shock shaft bend. It was my only break slash bend that I've had in the vehicle so far. So I swapped those out for the chrome ones. Other than that, they're the exact same length, same size, everything is the exact same, other than they are just the upgraded chrome shafts that are just a little bit stronger. Moving back a little bit, I am gonna have a metal aluminum servo saber. Again, just to have a little bit of extra durability. I guess the servo horn being metal is technically a durability upgrade, a change. I don't know who in their right mind is gonna run a plastic horn on their A-scale car, but I do have the ProTech metal horn on there. In the center of the vehicle, I did swap out to a metal spur gear, and that is going to be a 47 tooth, so 1 tooth larger than what the kit factory plastic gear is. The metal is just, you have a little bit of extra durability with the metal, and I think that it is actually the only option for the 47 tooth at the moment. And if I remember correctly, the spur gear is the opposite of the pinion gear, so if we go up on spur, that's the same thing as going down on pinion. So we lost a little bit top end, but we got a little bit more acceleration out of it via that gear. On top of that gear, we are going to have the Malley Performance Center carbon brace. Nothing super crazy there other than it's really pretty, and it helps to kind of tie in the carbon fiber of like the top plate and the rear hub plates. And then to actually transition now to the back of the vehicle, I do have some Malley Performance rear hub plates on. These positions that I'm in right now is a +2, so it is a factory achievable position, but I did opt to put the Malley Performance plates on rather than the kit ones, just because it's a solid piece, looks a little bit prettier, you don't get the double row. But it is, like I said, a kit achievable set. On the wing, like I said, before we pulled the body off and started looking at all this stuff, I do have that universal wing button, and I believe the last thing that is going to change up here is just going to be these collars that are on the shock standoff mounting screws. Disperses the weight a little bit more, they're the pressure a little bit more, but is definitely mostly just a blingy end of things. Other than that, I believe everything else is just the factory kit stuff, and the majority of the stuff that you get from the factory isn't necessarily going to perform any differently, but this stuff does look a little bit prettier in the grand scheme of things. So to now transition into the actual kind of more build tuning end of things here, I do have in the diffs, I've got a 7, 30, and a 5, which is going to sound really, really funky in the grand scheme of things, but there is a reason for that. That is going to be where there's going to be HTC gears in the front and the rear. So a more traditional 8th scale gear setup, whereas the center is going to be an LTC gear set. So smaller gears, you need the thicker fluid to make up for that. Now, the theory with that is you're going to get a little bit more acceleration via the spur gear, but to make it to where it's not too aggressive or too peppy, the 30K with the LTC kind of slows everything down a little bit. So you still get a smooth power band throughout, but you still get that kind of extra acceleration. And I think that even if you had the 46 tooth gear, I would still run that LTC center just to make it really easy, really consistent to drive around the track. And then something that I did forget to mention is going to be inside the shocks themselves isn't going to be the kit pistons. I believe the kit pistons is like a 614, 615. So something that's going to be pretty on the soft side in the grand scheme of things. Something you'll see definitely on a bumpier, rougher track. Something I think a little bit more West Coast-ish. So in here, per Mr. Setzer's guidance, I did go ahead and throw in some 8-hole pistons, some bypass pistons. I got as close to what he was, which is going to be an 812 in the front, 813 in the back. I opted to go with the MIPs just because that's just what I like to use. The flaps is going to be a blue flap in the front and a green flap in the back. So a little bit quicker on the rebound end of things. Traditionally, an 8-hole piston, I think, is a little bit slower reacting of a piston. So by allowing the quicker rebound, you still get the shock action out of it, but you get the same 8-hole pack on that upstroke. And I think that that will then square away the last tuning extra special bit, I guess you could say. There are one other tuning option that I've got on here, which is going to be the front sway bar. Right now, I kind of swap between the 2.2 and the 2.1. 2.2 is what should be in the kit. 2.1 is what I will run here on the indoor track at Adrenaline. I think for at the moment, because I do have a new layout in there, I'm going to start with that 2.2 bar, but I'm going to probably swap the 2.1 just once everything is kind of grooved in, broken in, and we get a better feel for what the track is actually going to drive like. And that should round out the kind of option stuff, extra stuff that you buy on the back end, not stuff that is necessarily going to be in the kit. For stuff that is in the kit, the general setup of the car really isn't anything super crazy. I think the craziest part of it is just for the indoor track, I moved the upper arms all the way forward just to get the car to be a little bit more reactive. That is something that is going to be very specific to that tight indoor track end of things. At Motorama, I did run the traditional upper arm setup, which was just going to be in the middle of that pin. So you have a little bit more caster, comparatively speaking. For the way I've got it right now, I have caster taken out of it, again, to just get the car to feel a little bit more pointy on this tighter indoor track. And then the other thing that is probably the most different, again, specific to the indoor track, is that the upper arm pills in the shock tower are in and down. So in the lower portion end of things, again, makes the car a little bit more reactive on the tighter track. Traditionally, on any of the bigger tracks, you'll run the inside up on the tower. Like I was saying before, you'll run that middle position on the upper arm, and then you pretty much have the baseline for everywhere else you're going to go. Lee did have me throw on the +1 hexes for Motorama just to widen the car and make it flow a little bit more around the track, but I don't think that that's necessarily an ultra required thing. So other than the stuff that I've gone over, I've only had a couple of tuning options that I actually have changed in the car as I've driven it. The grand scheme of things, I really haven't changed the car a whole lot throughout testing and the break-in and then the actual racing end of things, other than just making it accommodate the different style of track. Obviously, a tight indoor track is very different than a large sweeping track. So other than just kind of accommodating from one style of a track to another, my diff oils were the same, shock oils were the same. I think my rear link, I moved it one position down compared to where it was. So in the grand scheme of things, there's really only 3 things that I've changed from the one track to the other, and that is sway bar, upper mounting location, and arm. So I guess maybe it's 4 because the arm is, I guess, technically 2, and then on the back, that link change. So that is one thing that I am very happy with the car, and I think makes it user friendly. Just, you don't have to change it a whole lot. Once you find your base setup, unless you're going to a very niche track, you really don't have to change it a whole lot. So I'm very, very happy with that. Now on the build end of things, this is, I think, where we're gonna have the biggest difference between something like the Techno and the Associated. The Techno, like I said in that video, builds very well, builds very smooth, very easy to follow, and I think that's a great user-friendly build. I believe that this build is gonna be a little bit more advanced just because you do have a couple bit of tuning options that come in it. You do have the different sets of gears that come in the box, so you do have to decide that. So if you're a newbie, you probably aren't gonna know what those different gear sets are, so it's gonna be very easy to mix stuff like that up by accident. And then I just feel like building the pillow balls themselves aren't the most user-friendly. Other than those two things, the car itself, you know, builds very smooth, everything goes together well, there's nothing crazy. But I definitely think that even though there's only those two components that are confusing or difficult, they are difficult and advanced enough that I don't think that this is gonna be necessarily, you know, somebody that, you know, it's your first A-scale build. I still think that I would go with the Tekno over that. But other than the build end of things, maintenance on it has been very, very easy. Getting to the diffs is super easy. Changing out the pills is super easy. No issues there at all. And then durability wise, like I was saying before, the only thing I've had is just that shock shaft. So nothing crazy at all. It's definitely been a very good car. Now, to add a little bit more of the durability end of things, we'll continue to compare the Tekno to this. I think that, again, the Tekno, being that it's as beefy as what it is and as neutral out of the box, I think is still going to be the better user-friendly initial getting into A-scale vehicle. Whereas I think that this is definitely going to be more on the racy end of things per se. And you can kind of see that in both the cars. You know, one's definitely built very beefy, very sturdy, whereas this one is definitely built not small necessarily. It's still beefy. You know, it's still an A-scale car, and it's still going to be plenty durable in the grand scheme of things. But you'll notice that the things on it are definitely skinnier, I guess would be the word. You know, your shock towers aren't as thick. Your shock or your chassis plate isn't as thick, I believe. The arms, stuff like that is definitely beefier on the Tekno compared to this. And I think that that also plays into that kind of user-friendly, durable car versus racy, nimble car, I guess would be the best way to describe the comparison of one car to the other. So again, I haven't spent an ungodly amount of time with this car, so a little bit of that is definitely kind of predictions and just kind of using my own personal background knowledge based off of the way that the car itself looks. But as we spend more and more time with it, we'll definitely get a better, well-rounded picture of that. Now, to finish out the video, we'll talk about, of course, my driving impressions, which is probably the most important thing that you guys are interested in at the moment. And I am going to continue comparing this to the Tekno just because it is the only reference that I have on the channel at the moment. That way you guys can have an actual like information reference rather than me just kind of, oh yeah, compared to this random car. I figure it's gonna be a little bit nicer of or an easier comparison to make just because we already have that data of the way the Tekno is. So driving wise for this, I feel like that to achieve maximum lap time out of it or maximum consistent lap time out of it, I think that once you have the good base set up on it, like I have now because I'm following Lee Setzer, is it seems to generate its lap time a little bit easier, comparatively speaking, in the sense of as long as I don't overdrive the car, it kind of just takes care of itself in a way. It's a very consistent, very predictable car. I definitely didn't have any issues with it doing anything funkier on the track. It definitely seemed to flow and arch around turns a little bit easier compared to the Tekno, which makes sense just because it is a pillowball car compared to the C-Hub. Traditionally, a pillowball car, you're kind of always turning, whereas the C-Hub, in theory, you're kind of getting to the turn and pivoting. So from a flow standpoint, I feel like that this was a little bit easier to keep that kind of consistent feel around the track. And I also want to, take a step back again. This is specifically for maximizing the car, not necessarily for general driving. This is, again, specific to maximizing that pace. I think that this does reach its maximum pace a little bit easier, and it's a little bit easier to drive the car to it. You don't have to push the car, you just let the car flow around the track the way it needs to. Whereas I feel like with the Tekno, I definitely had to spend a little bit more time on the wheel, making sure that I, as the driver, was putting the car where it needed to be, rather than the car kind of doing the work for me, if that makes sense. And I want to take a step back, that from a general consumer standpoint, somebody who, again, is getting into it, that's not trying to go balls to the wall fast or straight out of the gate, I still am in belief that the Tekno is going to be a very solid car for that. It's going to be a great option to be consistent and easy to drive. This is, again, I know I'm like a broken record. This is, again, to maximize the pace of the car. And the reason why I want to specify that is just because not everybody is going to come out of the gate maximizing. Some people will, some people won't. So I like to give that kind of area of, if you're on that more beginner end of things, then I would start with the Tekno. And then there's going to be kind of like a middle transition point where you've built up skill and you're looking for that extra little bit out of it. Then I think would be when you would transition into something like the Associated, for example. It's a very, very solid car. It's a very good race car. And I definitely can't say that I have any major gripes with it at the moment. I haven't had any crazy breakages other than just that shock shaft bending. It's not done anything funky to me maintenance-wise. I'm able to get into it and rebuild everything very, very quickly without any issues at all. I haven't had to change the setup pretty much any, other than just kind of changing from the niche indoor track to a more traditional A-scale track. But overall, after only 2 weeks of having the car, I'm very happy with it. It's a very well planted car, and I think that definitely for the driver that is looking for that extra little bit to maximize as quickly as you can around the track, this is going to be an easier platform to achieve that with compared to something like the Tekno. And again, I know I'm a broken record, but I just like to very clearly kind of give that outline of how you would work through things, because, obviously, a beginner isn't necessarily going to be worried about the same things as what I guess you could call it a pro-am, professional amateur. Pro-am would be the way to go with it. You're not quite to that pro level just yet. At that level, those guys can drive anything. But at that, transition point where you're going from kind of just, that learning beginning point into the more advanced end of things, this is a great option, because obviously at that point you'll be familiar with working on things. You'll be a little bit more in tune to looking for stuff like the different gears or building the pill balls and all that. So that is my initial impressions. I probably got a little bit off on a couple of points there, but we are rounding it all back in here to the end of the video. I think originally at the start of the video I said it probably wasn't going to be as long of a video, but after detailing everything, it's going to end up being the same length. So thank you all for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the content for today. And definitely, if you have any questions regarding this particular car, or maybe more information of how I feel comparing the Tekno to the Associated, or if you just have a request for a video you want to see in the future, definitely leave those down in the comment section below. I'm sure soon enough we'll revisit this with a final impressions video. But until then, we'll see you guys next week's video.